The billionaire's jaw dropped when the little delivery girl looked him in the eyes and whispered, "Daddy, is that really you?" But what she revealed next left him speechless and changed both their lives forever. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Marcus Wellington stood in the marble-floored foyer of his Beverly Hills mansion, adjusting his custom Armani tie one final time before the evening's board meeting. At 30 years old, he had built Wellington Technologies into a billion-dollar empire. But tonight felt different. Something in the air seemed electric with possibility, or perhaps danger. The golden California sunset filtered through the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across his minimalist living space. Everything in Marcus's life was precisely ordered, calculated, and controlled. He thrived on predictability, on knowing exactly what each day would bring. That's when the doorbell rang. Marcus frowned. His security team never allowed unannounced visitors, especially not at 7:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. His housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, had left hours ago, and he wasn't expecting any deliveries. The smart home system showed a small figure on the front porch, impossibly small. He opened the heavy oak door and looked down to find a tiny girl, no more than 7 years old, wearing a faded pink jacket that had seen better days. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she clutched a thermal delivery bag that seemed almost as big as she was. Her sneakers were worn at the toes, but her eyes, those striking green eyes, sparkled with determination that seemed far beyond her years. "Food delivery for Mr. Wellington," she announced, with the professionalism of someone 3 times her age, then paused, studying his face intently. Something shifted in her expression, a recognition that made Marcus's chest tighten unexpectedly. "I think there's been a mistake," Marcus began, but the words died in his throat as the little girl's face broke into the most radiant smile he had ever seen. "Daddy!" The word hung in the air between them like a thunderclap. Marcus felt the world tilt sideways. His carefully constructed reality cracked down the middle as he stared into eyes that suddenly seemed hauntingly familiar. "What did you just call me?" The girl, this impossible, beautiful child, reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a worn photograph. Her small hands trembled slightly as she held it up to him. "Mama showed me this picture before she went to heaven. She said you were my daddy and that someday I'd find you." Marcus took the photograph with hands that felt disconnected from his body. The image was creased and faded, but unmistakably real. Himself, 8 years younger, arm wrapped around a woman with the same green eyes as the child standing before him, Sarah. Sweet, beautiful Sarah, whom he had loved with all the passion his 22-year-old heart could muster before fear and ambition had driven him away. "Her name was Sarah Mitchell," the little girl whispered as if reading his thoughts. "She told me to be brave and find you if anything ever happened to her. I'm Emma Mitchell, and I've been looking for you for so long, Daddy." The thermal bag slipped from Emma's small hands and hit the marble floor with a soft thud, but neither of them noticed. Marcus stared at this child, his child, standing on his doorstep like a miracle wrapped in poverty and hope. But as the initial shock began to wear off, one terrible question burned in his mind. If Sarah was gone, and this little girl was out here delivering food at night, alone. "Emma," he whispered, kneeling down to meet her eyes. "Where have you been living?" Emma's small hand slipped into Marcus's as naturally as breathing, and in that moment, his billion-dollar empire felt insignificant compared to the trust of this tiny person calling him Daddy. "I live with Grandma Rose in East L.A., Emma said, her voice growing smaller. "She's been taking care of me since Mama died last year, but she's really sick now. She can't work anymore, and we don't have money for her medicine." Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. East L.A., a world away from his Beverly Hills mansion, a place where children worked instead of played, where grandmothers chose between medication and meals. "That's why I deliver food every night after school," Emma continued matter-of-factly, as if 7-year-olds working to support their families was the most natural thing in the world. "Mr. Rodriguez at the restaurant lets me help, and I get to keep some of the tips, but it's not enough for Grandma's breathing medicine." The weight of her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. While he'd been building his tech empire, attending galas and collecting rare art, his daughter, had been struggling to survive just 30 miles away. "Emma," he said, his voice rough with emotion he'd forgotten how to feel, "why didn't you try to find me sooner?" Her green eyes, so much like Sarah's, filled with tears. "Mama made me promise not to bother you unless something really bad happened. She said you were important and busy and that you probably forgot about us. But when Grandma started turning blue when she coughed, I knew it was really bad." Marcus pulled Emma into his arms, this brave little warrior who had been carrying the weight of the world on shoulders that should have known only the burden of a backpack full of homework. The expensive fabric of his suit absorbed her tears as years of carefully constructed emotional walls crumbled around him. "You're never bothering me," he whispered into her hair. "Never. And I never forgot about your mama, Emma. I was just scared and stupid." As he held his daughter for the first time, Marcus made a silent vow. He would move heaven and earth to make up for the 7 years he'd lost, starting with saving the grandmother who had raised his child when he wasn't there to do it himself. But first, he needed to meet Rose Mitchell, and he had a feeling that conversation would change everything he thought he knew about the kind of man he'd become. The drive through East LA felt like traveling to another planet. Marcus's Tesla moved silently through streets lined with check-cashing stores, taco trucks, and apartments with bars on the windows. Emma sat beside him in the passenger seat, giving directions with the confidence of someone who had walked these streets countless times alone. "Turn left at the corner with the broken streetlight," she said, pointing toward a narrow street lined with aging apartment buildings. "Grandma Rose always waits up for me, even when she's too tired to stand." Marcus parked outside a building that had seen better decades. The paint was peeling, and the security gate hung slightly askew, but Emma bounded out of the car with the excitement of a child coming home. "Grandma! Grandma Rose!" Emma called as they climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor. "I found him! I found my daddy!" The door opened before they reached it, revealing a woman in her 70s who moved with obvious difficulty. Rose Mitchell had Emma's same determined green eyes, but they were now clouded with illness and exhaustion. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and despite her obvious poverty, she wore a clean house dress and had maintained her dignity with the grace of someone who had weathered many storms. "Emma Louise Mitchell," Rose said, her voice carrying both relief and gentle scolding. "You've been gone for 3 hours. I was worried sick." Then her eyes found Marcus, and the color drained from her weathered face. "You," she whispered, gripping the doorframe for support. "You're Sarah's Marcus." The weight of recognition, of judgment, of years of absence hung heavy in the narrow hallway. Marcus had faced hostile board meetings, aggressive competitors and ruthless investors, but nothing had prepared him for the quiet assessment in this grandmother's eyes. "Mrs. Mitchell," Marcus began, but Rose held up a trembling hand. "Rose," she corrected, then looked down at Emma with infinite tenderness. "Baby girl, why don't you show your father your drawings while I make some tea?" As Emma tugged Marcus into the tiny but spotlessly clean apartment, he caught glimpses of a life lived with love, despite hardship. Emma's school artwork covered the refrigerator, library books were stacked neatly on a makeshift table, and despite the thrift store furniture, everything spoke of care and devotion. "Grandma Rose taught me to read before I started school," Emma chattered, pulling out a shoebox full of crayon drawings. And she makes the best pancakes in the whole world, even though we can only have them on special days now. Marcus studied the drawings, stick figures of a little girl, an older woman, and in many of them a tall man labelled Daddy, standing slightly apart from the others. His daughter had been drawing him into her life for years, imagining a father who had never bothered to exist for her. When Rose returned with tea in mismatched cups, Marcus saw the oxygen tank tucked discreetly behind her chair and heard the slight wheeze in her breathing. "Thank you," he said, accepting the cup, "for taking care of her, for loving her when I wasn't here to do it." Rose's smile was sad but kind. "Emma is the light of my life, Mr. Wellington, but I'm not going to live forever, and that child needs her father." The truth hung in the room like a challenge, and Marcus realized that earning Emma's love would be only the beginning. He had to prove himself worthy of the trust this remarkable woman had placed in him. The next morning, Marcus arrived at Rose's apartment with 2 suitcases of cash, more money than most people saw in a lifetime. He had solutions for everything: private doctors for Rose, a new apartment in a better neighborhood, the best private schools for Emma. Money, he had learned, could fix most problems. He was wrong. "Mr. Wellington," Rose said gently, closing the suitcase he had opened on her kitchen table, "this is very generous, but we can't accept charity from someone who just discovered Emma exists." Marcus felt his first taste of real frustration since childhood. "It's not charity. She's my daughter. Let me take care of you both." "Emma," Rose called, "come sit with us for a minute." Emma appeared from her bedroom, wearing her school uniform, a carefully maintained white shirt and navy skirt that had probably been purchased second-hand but pressed with pride. "Your father wants to help us," Rose explained, "but I need you to understand something very important. Money doesn't make someone a parent. Being there every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, that's what makes a family." Emma looked between them with the wisdom of a child who had grown up too fast. "Are you going to stay this time, Daddy, even when it gets boring or scary?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. In his world, when things got difficult, he hired someone else to handle them. When relationships became complicated, he walked away. He had walked away from Sarah when she needed him most, and now his 7-year-old daughter was asking him to prove he wouldn't do the same to her. "I want to stay," he said honestly, "but I don't know how to be a father, Emma. I don't know how to be the kind of man who deserves a family like you and Grandma Rose." The Rose's expression softened slightly. "The fact that you know that is a good start." "Can you teach me?" Marcus asked, the words foreign in his mouth. Marcus Wellington, who commanded boardrooms and built empires, was asking a sick grandmother in East LA to teach him how to be human. "Being a parent isn't something you learn in a day," Rose said, beginning to cough, a harsh, rattling sound that made Emma immediately move to rub her grandmother's back. "But if you're serious about being in Emma's life, really in it, then you start with the small things." "Like what?" "Like picking her up from school tomorrow. Like learning what her favorite subject is. Like being here when she's scared at night, not just when it's convenient for you." Marcus watched Emma comfort her grandmother with practiced ease. This little girl who had been forced to grow up too quickly and made a decision that would either redeem him or destroy the careful life he had built. "I'll take a leave of absence from my company," he said. "I want to learn how to be Emma's father before I lose the chance." Rose and Emma exchanged a look, and for the first time since he'd met them, Marcus saw hope flicker in both their eyes. But as Rose's coughing fit worsened, Marcus realized that time was a luxury they might not have. Marcus arrived at Emma's school at 3:15 p.m. sharp, sitting in his Tesla among a sea of beat-up minivans and working parents who looked nothing like the polished executives from his usual world. He had never felt more out of place or more determined to belong. Emma emerged from the building walking slowly, her small backpack looking enormous on her tiny frame. But when she spotted his car, her face lit up like Christmas morning. "Daddy!" she called, running toward him with the pure joy that only children possess. "You really came." "And I said I would," Marcus replied, lifting her into a hug that felt more valuable than any business deal he had ever closed. As they drove back to Rose's apartment, Emma chatted about her day with the enthusiasm of someone who finally had a parent to share it with. "Mrs. Rodriguez says I'm the best reader in second grade, and Tommy Morrison said his dad might take him to Disneyland, and Jessica Chen brought cupcakes for her birthday, but I couldn't have one because we have to save money for Grandma's medicine." Each casual revelation was like a knife to Marcus's heart. His daughter was brilliant, social and generous, but she was also 7 years old and worried about medical bills. When they reached the apartment, Rose was waiting with obvious concern. "Emma, baby, we need to talk," she said, her voice more strained than usual. Marcus noticed immediately that Rose looked worse than she had the day before. Her lips had a bluish tint, and she was leaning heavily on the doorframe. "The doctor called," Rose continued, struggling to catch her breath. "My tests came back and they want me to go to the hospital tonight." Emma's small hand slipped into Marcus's, and he felt her whole body tense with fear. "Are you going to be okay, Grandma?" Rose's smile was brave but fragile. "I'm going to try, sweetheart, but I need to know that you're going to be safe while I'm gone." The weight of the moment settled on Marcus's shoulders like a mantle of responsibility he had never worn before. Emma needed him. Not his money, not his connections, but him present and committed and steady in a way he had never been for anyone. "Emma can stay with me," he said, the words coming out more confident than he felt. "For as long as she needs to." "At your big house?" Emma asked, her eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and fear. "If you want to," Marcus replied, "we can set up a room just for you and visit Grandma Rose every day until she's better." Rose's eyes filled with tears of relief and gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "I've been so scared of what would happen to her if—" "Nothing is going to happen to you," Marcus said firmly, though he could see how sick Rose really was. "I'm going to get you the best doctors, the best treatment. Emma needs her grandma." But as they packed Emma's few belongings, clothes that had been carefully mended, toys that had been loved to the point of falling apart, and her collection of crayon drawings, Marcus realized that the real test of his commitment was just beginning. Taking care of a child wasn't just about providing for them. It was about showing up every single day, even when you didn't know what you were doing, especially when you were scared of failing them. Emma stood in the marble foyer of Marcus's mansion, her small suitcase looking impossibly tiny in the vast space. For the first time since Marcus had met her, she seemed overwhelmed, her usual confidence replaced by the uncertainty of a child in an alien world. "It's so big," she whispered, her voice echoing in the cavernous entryway. "Do you live here all by yourself?" "I used to," Marcus replied, kneeling down to meet her eyes. "But now you're here, so I won't be alone anymore." As he showed Emma through the house, past the formal dining room that had never hosted a family meal, the pristine kitchen that rarely saw more than takeout containers, and the living room with furniture too expensive to actually live on, Marcus began to see his life through her eyes. Everything was beautiful, but nothing was warm. Everything was perfect, but nothing felt like home. "Can I really stay in any room I want?" Emma asked, peeking into the guest suite with its own bathroom and sitting area. "Any room except mine," Marcus said with a smile, "but I was thinking maybe we could pick one together and make it special just for you." Emma's face lit up. "With my drawings on the walls and maybe some books?" "As many books as you want," Marcus promised, feeling something shift in his chest. We can go shopping tomorrow and get everything you need." That evening, as Emma sat at the kitchen island eating cereal for dinner, because Marcus realized he had never actually cooked a meal in his gourmet kitchen, she grew quiet and thoughtful. "Daddy," she said finally, "why didn't you come looking for me and Mama?" The question he had been dreading hung in the air between them. Marcus had faced congressional hearings, hostile takeovers, and ruthless competitors, but nothing had prepared him for the honest curiosity in his 7-year-old daughter's eyes. "Because I was scared," he said, choosing truth over comfort. "When your mama told me she was having a baby, I got scared that I wouldn't be good enough, that I would mess everything up. So I ran away instead of staying to find out." "But Mama was scared too," Emma said quietly. "She told Grandma Rose that she was scared of being a mama by herself. Why didn't you stay and be scared together?" The simplicity of her logic was devastating. Marcus had built an empire on calculated risks, but he had been too cowardly to take the most important risk of all, the risk of loving someone completely, of being needed, of possibly failing the people who mattered most. "I should have," he admitted. "I should have stayed and been scared with your mama. I should have been there when you were born, and for your first steps, and your first day of school. I made a terrible mistake, Emma, and I'm sorry." Emma studied him with those wise green eyes that held far too much understanding for her age. "Grandma Rose says everybody makes mistakes, but what matters is what you do after. What do you want me to do after, Emma?" She was quiet for a long moment, swinging her legs from the tall bar stool. Then she reached across the counter and took his hand. "I want you to help me save Grandma Rose," she said simply. "And I want you to promise you won't get scared and run away again, even when being my daddy is hard." Marcus squeezed her small hand, feeling the weight of a promise that would either redeem every selfish choice he had ever made or break his heart trying. "I promise, Emma, I'm not going anywhere. Going." Jason, but as they prepared for bed in this mansion that had never housed a family, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that keeping that promise would require him to become someone he had never been before, and he wasn't sure if he was strong enough to change. Marcus Wellington had conquered Silicon Valley, but a 7-year-old's bedtime routine was defeating him completely. "I need water, but not too much water because then I'll have to go potty," Emma explained from her new princess bed, surrounded by shopping bags full of toys that remained largely ignored. "And I need my nightlight, but not the bright one because it hurts my eyes. And I need 3 stories, but they can't be scary stories because then I dream about monsters." It was 10:30 p.m., well past what Marcus had learned was a reasonable bedtime, but every time he thought Emma was settled, she remembered something else she needed. At Wellington Technologies, he managed teams across 3 time zones, but one small child was exposing every gap in his leadership abilities. "And the closet door has to be open just a little bit," Emma continued. "Because if it's closed all the way, monsters might be hiding in there, but if it's open too much, they might come out." Marcus adjusted the closet door for the 3rd time, marveling at the precise engineering specifications his daughter required for sleep. In his business life, he appreciated attention to detail, but Emma's nighttime requirements made his most demanding clients look flexible. "And Daddy," Emma continued, her voice growing smaller, "can you check my phone?" Marcus looked confused. "Emma, you don't have a phone." "The house phone," she clarified, pointing to the landline extension he'd had installed in her room. "Sometimes Grandma Rose calls really late when she can't sleep at the hospital, and I want to make sure she's okay." The weight of Emma's worry hit Marcus like a physical blow. While he had been frustrated about bedtime logistics, his daughter had been carrying the anxiety of a sick grandmother on her 7-year-old shoulders. He realized that Emma's elaborate bedtime routine wasn't about control. It was about creating enough tasks to distract herself from fear. "How about this?" Marcus said, settling into the plush armchair beside her bed. "I'll keep my phone right here next to your bed, and if Grandma Rose calls, I'll wake you up immediately. But you need to try to sleep, because Grandma Rose wants you to be healthy and rested." "Do you think she's scared at the hospital all by herself?" Emma asked, her green eyes reflecting fears too big for her age. "Sometimes I get scared here in this big house, even though it's beautiful. It echoes funny." Marcus felt something crack in his chest. In his eagerness to provide Emma with luxury, he hadn't considered that a 7-year-old might find his minimalist mansion isolating rather than impressive. "I think Grandma Rose is the bravest person I've ever met," Marcus said carefully, "but even brave people get scared sometimes. That's why we're going to visit her first thing tomorrow morning." "Before your work meetings?" Emma asked, hope flickering in her voice. "I don't have any work meetings tomorrow," Marcus said, realizing he had completely reorganized his life without consciously deciding to do so, or any day this week. "Right now you and Grandma Rose are my only job." Emma's smile was sleepy but radiant. "Really? But don't you have to make money and be important?" "I have enough money," Marcus said, brushing her hair back from her forehead. "And the most important thing I can be is your daddy." "Will you tell me about Mama?" Emma asked suddenly. "Was she pretty? Did she like ice cream? Did she want me before I was born?" The questions hit Marcus like arrows. "Your Mama was the most beautiful woman I ever met," he said, his voice thick with memory. "She had green eyes just like yours, and she loved strawberry ice cream, and she wanted you more than anything in the world." Then why didn't you want us?" Emma asked with devastating honesty. Marcus felt his world tilt sideways. "I did want you," Marcus said finally. "I wanted you and your mama so much that it scared me. I was afraid I wouldn't be good enough, so instead of staying and learning how to be better, I ran away." But I would have helped you learn," Emma said simply. "Kids are good teachers. We're very patient." Marcus laughed despite his tears. "You're right. You are a very good teacher. You're teaching me right now." "I'm teaching you how to be my daddy," Emma agreed solemnly. "It's an important job." "The most important job I'll ever have," Marcus confirmed. "Now close your eyes and think about something happy." "I'm thinking about when Grandma Rose comes home and we can all have pancakes together," Emma murmured, her breathing growing deeper. As Marcus watched his daughter fall asleep, he realized that everything he thought he knew about success was being rewritten by a child who found happiness in the promise of shared pancakes. But the contentment was shattered by his phone, buzzing with an urgent message from the hospital. "Rose Mitchell requests to see you immediately. Come alone." "It's urgent." Marcus found Rose Mitchell in the cardiac wing at 2 a.m., looking frailer than he had ever seen her. The hospital bed made her seem impossibly small, but her eyes still held that fierce protectiveness he had come to recognize as Emma's inheritance. "Thank you for coming," Rose said, her voice barely above a whisper. "How is Emma?" Sleeping," Marcus replied, settling into the uncomfortable visitor's chair. "She's worried about you. She wanted me to bring you ice chips and her drawing of the brave princess." Rose's smile was tender but heartbreaking. "That child has been taking care of everyone around her since she was old enough to walk." "The doctors were honest with me today, Marcus," Rose continued, struggling to sit up straighter. "My heart is failing, and there isn't much time left. Days, maybe a week if I'm very lucky." The words hung in the sterile hospital air like a death sentence. Marcus felt the same helpless rage that had driven him to build his fortune, the fury of a man who had always believed every problem had a solution if you threw enough money at it. "We'll get second opinions," Marcus said immediately. "The best cardiologists in the world. I'll fly in specialists from Mayo Clinic, from Johns Hopkins." Marcus, Rose interrupted gently. I'm 74 years old. My heart has been failing for 2 years. The doctors have been honest. This isn't about money. Sometimes love means accepting what we cannot change. Marcus felt tears burning his eyes. Emma doesn't know, does she? She suspects, Rose said, her voice breaking slightly. But there are things you need to know about Emma, about Sarah, before I can't tell you anymore. Rose reached into her bedside table and pulled out a manila envelope, worn soft with age. Sarah left these for you. Letters she wrote but never sent. Pictures of Emma growing up, documents you're going to need. Marcus opened the envelope with trembling hands. The first item was a letter addressed to him in Sarah's familiar handwriting, dated just weeks before Emma was born. Marcus, it began, I know you're scared. I'm terrified too. But I need you to know that I never wanted to trap you or force you into anything. I fell in love with you completely, and when you left, it broke something in me that never healed. But Emma deserves to know her father, even if you don't want to know her. I'm going to love her enough for both of us. She never stopped loving you, Rose whispered, watching Marcus read with tears streaming down his face. Even when she was dying, she made me promise that if anything happened to her, I would make sure Emma found you. Marcus's hands shook as he continued reading Sarah's words. There were pictures of Emma as a baby, as a toddler, school photos with gap-toothed grins, art projects labeled "For Daddy" in crayon letters. Why didn't she contact me directly? Marcus asked, his voice breaking. Because she was proud, Rose said simply, and because she was afraid you'd reject Emma the same way you rejected her. She couldn't bear the thought of Emma experiencing that pain. There's something else, Rose continued, her breathing becoming more labored. Sarah was working on her master's degree in social work when she got sick. She wanted to help children in foster care, kids like Emma might become if something happened to both of us. The implications hit Marcus like a freight train. Without Rose, Emma had no one. Despite his biological connection to her, he had no legal rights, no custody arrangements. What do I need to do to adopt her legally? Marcus asked. It's complicated, Rose admitted. Sarah never listed you on Emma's birth certificate because you had already left. Without your legal recognition, Emma becomes a ward of the state when I... She couldn't finish the sentence. Marcus felt his carefully controlled world crumbling. He had money, power, and influence, but bureaucracy and time were enemies he couldn't simply outmaneuver. Rose, he said, gripping her frail hand, I need you to stay alive long enough for me to fix this. Emma needs both of us. Rose's smile was sad, but determined. I'm going to try, Marcus, but you need to be prepared for the possibility that loving Emma might mean fighting for her in ways you never imagined. The family court judge looked exactly like what Marcus had expected. Tired, overworked, and skeptical of rich men who suddenly discovered fatherhood was convenient. Judge Patricia Henley had been hearing custody cases for 20 years, and she had seen every variation of parental neglect and abandonment. Mr. Wellington, Judge Henley said, reviewing the emergency petition Marcus's lawyer had filed, you're asking this court to grant you immediate custody of a child you've known for exactly 12 days, a child whose existence you claim to have been unaware of for 7 years. Your Honor, Marcus began, but Judge Henley held up her hand. I'm not finished. You're also asking us to expedite a paternity test, waive the standard waiting periods, and bypass the usual requirements for home studies and character references. All while the child's legal guardian lies dying in a hospital bed. Marcus felt his lawyer, David Chen, tense beside him. They had known this would be an uphill battle, but hearing it laid out so starkly made the mountain they had to climb look impossibly steep. Your Honor, David interjected. My client has provided DNA evidence confirming paternity, character references from respected business leaders, and a complete financial disclosure showing his ability to provide for the child. Mr. Chen, Judge Henley replied, I don't doubt your client's financial resources. What concerns me is his moral fitness to raise a child he abandoned before she was born. What concerns me is a billionaire who thinks custody can be purchased like a corporate acquisition. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. In the sterile, fluorescent lighting of the family courtroom, surrounded by social workers and legal documents, the magnitude of his failures felt crushing. I'd like to hear from Mr. Wellington directly, the judge continued. Why should this court believe that a man who walked away from his pregnant girlfriend 7 years ago is suddenly prepared to be a responsible father? Marcus stood, feeling the weight of Emma's future hanging on his words. In boardrooms and congressional hearings, he had always known exactly what to say. But this wasn't about stock prices. This was about proving he deserved something he had never been brave enough to fight for. Your Honor, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his stomach, I can't defend what I did 7 years ago. I was 23, scared, and selfish. When Sarah told me she was pregnant, I convinced myself that walking away was better than staying and failing her. And what's changed? Judge Henley asked, her expression unreadable. I met Emma, Marcus replied simply. I looked into the eyes of my daughter and realized that I've spent 7 years failing her by not being there. She's brilliant, Your Honor. She's kind and brave and funny, and she's been taking care of everyone around her since she was old enough to walk. Mr. Wellington, the state of California doesn't award custody based on guilt or good intentions. We consider the best interests of the child. I then consider this, Marcus said, feeling desperation rise to the surface. Emma has been taking care of her dying grandmother while working as a delivery girl to pay for medication. She's 7 years old, Your Honor. She should be worried about homework and playground games, not whether her family can afford rent. And you believe money solves everything? Judge Henley asked. No, Marcus said, thinking about Emma's request for 3 bedtime stories and her worry about late-night phone calls from Rose. I believe love solves everything, and I love that little girl more than I knew it was possible to love anything. This court will order an expedited home study, Judge Henley finally announced. Mr. Wellington, you'll have supervised visitation while Mrs. Mitchell remains hospitalized. We'll reconvene in 72 hours to review the social worker's report. As they left the courthouse, Marcus felt the weight of borrowed time pressing down on him. 72 hours to prove he could be the father Emma deserved, while Rose fought to stay alive long enough to see her granddaughter safe. Marcus found Emma sitting in Rose's hospital room at 6 a.m., reading aloud from a picture book, while Rose dozed fitfully. The scene was so tender, so heartbreakingly domestic, that Marcus felt his chest tighten with love and grief in equal measure. "Daddy," Emma whispered, careful not to wake her grandmother. "I came early because Grandma Rose had a bad night, and I wanted to read her the story about the brave princess." "That's very thoughtful," Marcus said, settling into the chair beside them. "How did you get here so early?" "Mrs. Chen brought me," Emma replied, referring to his housekeeper, who had quietly taken on the role of Emma's caretaker during Marcus's legal meetings. "She said you had important grown-up things to handle, but that Grandma Rose was more important." Marcus felt a rush of gratitude toward the woman who had understood instinctively what Emma needed, without being asked. "Daddy," Emma said, her voice growing smaller, "is Grandma Rose going to die?" The question hung in the sterile hospital air like a prayer and a confession all at once. Marcus looked at his daughter and saw that despite her brave front, Emma had been preparing herself for this loss with the terrible wisdom of a child who had already buried her mother. "Grandma Rose is very sick, sweetheart," Marcus said carefully. "The doctors are doing everything they can, But she might die, Emma said, not a question but a statement delivered with heartbreaking matter-of-factness, like Mama did. She might, Marcus admitted, choosing honesty over false comfort. Emma was quiet for a long moment, stroking Rose's hand with the gentleness of someone far older than 7. "Will you still want me if Grandma Rose goes to heaven?" The question shattered something fundamental in Marcus's chest. "Emma, look at me," he said, kneeling down to meet her eyes. "I will always want you. Always. You are my daughter, and I love you more than anything in this world. Even if the judge says I can't live with you?" Emma asked, and Marcus realized that Emma understood exactly how precarious her situation was. "Even then," Marcus promised, "I will fight for you every single day until you're safely home with me." Rose stirred then, her eyes opening slowly. "Marcus," she whispered, "there's something I need to tell you. Something Sarah made me promise to keep secret until—" She gestured weakly toward her failing body. "What is it?" Marcus asked, though he could feel the answer was going to change everything. "Emma," Rose said gently, "could you get Grandma some ice chips from the machine down the hall?" When Emma had left, Rose turned to Marcus with eyes full of secrets and sorrow. "Sarah didn't just have a master's degree in social work, Marcus. She was adopted herself, raised in foster care until she was 16. She made me promise that if anything happened to both of us, Emma would never go into the system." Rose reached under her pillow and pulled out a sealed envelope. "This is Sarah's will, Marcus. She named a backup guardian in case I couldn't raise her." Marcus opened the envelope with trembling hands. A line made his blood run cold. In the event that Rose Mitchell is unable to care for Emma Mitchell, and if Marcus Wellington cannot be located or refuses guardianship, custody shall pass to James and Patricia Morrison. "Who are James and Patricia Morrison?" Marcus asked. "Sarah's old foster parents," Rose whispered. "Good people, but strangers to Emma. They live in Oregon, and they've been calling every day since I was hospitalized, asking about Emma's welfare." The implication hit Marcus like a tsunami. If the court decided he was unfit, if Rose died before he could establish legal custody, Emma would be taken away from everything she knew, sent to live with people she had never met. "They don't know about you," Rose continued. "Sarah never told them Emma's father had been found. They think they're Emma's only option." Marcus felt the walls of his world collapse around him. There was another family out there who believed they were saving Emma from an uncertain future, and who had the law on their side. "Rose," Marcus said, gripping her frail hand, "I need you to hold on just a little longer. I need time to make this right." Rose's smile was peaceful, but heartbreaking. "I've been holding on for Emma since the day she was born, Marcus. But time isn't something I can control anymore." As Emma returned with the ice chips, Marcus realized that saving his daughter was going to require more than love, more than money, and more than good intentions. It was going to require a miracle. Marcus sat in his lawyer's office at 3 a.m., surrounded by legal documents, coffee cups, and the desperate energy of a man running out of time. Rose had taken a turn for the worse. The Morrisons were flying in from Oregon, and the social worker's report had arrived with devastating conclusions. "I'm going to be honest with you, Marcus," David Chen said, setting down the official evaluation. "This isn't good news." Marcus forced himself to read the social worker's assessment, while Mr. A. Wellington appears financially capable of providing for the child. His lack of parenting experience, recent entry into Emma's life, and absence of established routine raise significant concerns about stability. The evaluator recommends extended supervised visitation rather than immediate custody transfer. "They're going to give Emma to the Morrisons," Marcus said, the words tasting like ashes in his mouth. "Not necessarily," David replied, though his tone wasn't encouraging. "But Judge Henley is conservative when it comes to child welfare. She's going to prioritize what looks safest on paper. Marcus laughed bitterly. And what looks safest is sending Emma to live with strangers 3 states away, rather than with her biological father, who spent the last 2 weeks learning to make pancakes and braid hair. The Morrisons have 20 years of foster care experience, David pointed out. They have references, home studies, and a proven track record with children from difficult situations. Emma's situation isn't difficult, Marcus snapped. Emma's situation is that her father was a coward who didn't show up when she needed him, and now she's about to lose the only parent figure she has left. David leaned forward, his expression serious. Then prove to the judge that you're not that coward anymore. Prove that you're the father Emma needs, not just the one she deserves. Marcus stared out the window at the pre-dawn darkness, thinking about Emma, sleeping in the hospital chair beside Rose's bed because she refused to leave her grandmother's side. "What would it take?" Marcus asked suddenly. "What do you mean? What would it take to prove to Judge Henley that I'm serious about being Emma's father? Not just financially, but completely." David was quiet for a moment. "You'd have to show that Emma isn't just an addition to your existing life, but that she's become the center of it. That you understand parenting isn't a part-time job or a board position you can delegate." "What if I sold Wellington Technologies?" The words came out before Marcus had fully processed the thought, but once spoken, they felt completely right. "Marcus," David said carefully, "you've spent a decade building that company. It's worth nearly $2 billion. And Emma is worth more than that," Marcus replied, feeling a certainty he hadn't experienced since the day he decided to start his first tech venture. "I can't be the CEO of a major corporation and the present engaged father Emma needs. Not really. Not the way she deserves. You're talking about walking away from everything you've built." "No," Marcus corrected. "I'm talking about walking toward the most important thing I'll ever build. A family with my daughter." David stared at him for a long moment. "If you're serious about this, we could structure it as a trust for Emma's future, with you stepping down to focus on parenting. It would be a powerful statement to the court." Marcus thought about Emma's drawings, her bedtime worries, her fierce protection of Rose, and her simple question, "Are you going to stay this time, Daddy?" "Draft the papers," Marcus said. "I want to be able to tell Judge Henley tomorrow that Emma Wellington's father isn't just willing to provide for her, he's willing to choose her over everything else." As dawn broke over Los Angeles, Marcus realized that for the first time in his life, success wouldn't be measured in stock prices or market share. It would be measured in bedtime stories, school pickups, and the trust shining in a 7-year-old's eyes. But first, he had to win the fight of his life against people who believed they were saving Emma from him. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was about to discover if love really could conquer everything, including the very system designed to protect children from fathers like he used to be. The courtroom was packed when Marcus entered at 2 p.m., carrying a manila envelope that contained the most important business decision of his life. Emma sat in the front row with Mrs. Chen, her small legs swinging nervously from the chair, wearing the blue dress Rose had helped her pick out just days before. Across the aisle sat James and Patricia Morrison, a kind-looking couple in their 60s who had driven through the night from Oregon, believing they were coming to save a child from an uncertain future. Judge Henley took her seat with the gravity of someone who understood that the decision she was about to make would shape a little girl's entire life. "Mr. Wellington," she began, "I've reviewed the social worker's report, the character references, and the testimony from Mrs. Mitchell's hospital bed. Before I make my ruling, do you have anything to add?" Marcus stood, his hands steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "Your Honor, yesterday morning I completed the sale of Wellington Technologies. The proceeds, $8 billion, have been placed in an irrevocable trust for Emma's education and future. I'm no longer a CEO, a board member, or an executive of any kind. I'm simply a father who has chosen his daughter over everything else he thought mattered. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Emma's eyes went wide with shock and something that looked like awe. The Morrisons exchanged glances, beginning to understand that this wasn't the abandoning father they had expected to meet. Furthermore, Marcus continued, I've enrolled in parenting classes, hired a full-time nanny to help with the transition, and moved my residence to be within walking distance of Emma's school. I've restructured my entire life around one principle, being the father Emma deserves every single day. Judge Henley studied him with the attention of someone looking for cracks in a carefully constructed facade. Mr. Wellington, this is an extraordinary gesture, but money, even when given up, doesn't make someone a parent. You're absolutely right, Marcus agreed. What makes me a parent is this. I know that Emma checks the closet door 3 times before bed because she's afraid of monsters. I know she saves the strawberry part of her ice cream for last because it was her mother's favorite. I know she pretends to be asleep sometimes just to hear me tell her I love her one more time before I leave her room. Emma's face lit up with recognition and joy. Across the aisle, Patricia Morrison whispered something to her husband, and Marcus could see them beginning to understand that Emma already had the father she needed. I also know, Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger, that Emma draws pictures of her mama in heaven, and that she's been taking care of everyone around her since she was old enough to walk. She deserves a parent who will take care of her for once, who will put her needs first, who will never walk away again no matter how scared I get. Judge Henley was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to the Morrisons. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison, would you like to address the court? James Morrison stood, his weathered hands clasped in front of him. Your Honor, Patricia and I came here believing we were Emma's only hope. But watching this young man, seeing how that little girl looks at him, Sarah would want Emma to be with her father. We withdraw any claim to custody. Emma jumped from her seat and ran to Marcus, wrapping her arms around his waist with the fierce love of a child who had finally found her safe harbor. You really gave up your whole company for me? She whispered. Emma, Marcus said, kneeling down to meet her eyes, that company was just a job. You are my heart. Custody is hereby awarded to Marcus Wellington, Judge Henley announced, her voice carrying a rare note of warmth. Mr. Wellington, don't make me regret this decision. I won't, Your Honor, I promise. 3 hours later, Marcus and Emma sat beside Rose's hospital bed. The older woman was barely conscious, but when Emma took her hand and whispered, Grandma Rose, I get to stay with Daddy forever, Rose squeezed her granddaughter's fingers with what little strength she had left. Sarah would be so proud, Rose whispered, her eyes finding Marcus's face. Take care of our girl. I will, Marcus promised, every day for the rest of my life. That night, as Emma fell asleep in her own bed in her own home, surrounded by pictures of her mother and drawings of their new family, Marcus realized that he had finally learned the difference between success and significance. Success had been about building an empire. Significance was about being the person Emma drew in her pictures when she labeled them my daddy. The man who stayed, who chose love over fear, who proved that sometimes the most important victory is admitting you were wrong and changing everything to make it right. Outside, the Beverly Hills mansions gleamed in the moonlight, monuments to achievement and ambition. But inside this house, a father read bedtime stories to his daughter, and that simple act felt more valuable than any fortune he had ever built. Emma had taught him that love wasn't something you earned through grand gestures or perfect performance. It was something you chose every day, in small moments that added up to a lifetime of showing up for the people who needed you most. And Marcus Wellington, former billionaire CEO, current full-time father, had finally learned how to stay. The renowned surgeon's daughter had never walked in her life, until the humble cleaning lady's son gently whispered, "Please, let me try to help you." What happened next left everyone speechless. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story, Doctor. Michael Thompson had performed over 3,000 surgeries in his 12-year career, but nothing had prepared him for the sight of his daughter Emma lying motionless in that hospital bed 8 years ago. Born with a rare spinal condition that left her legs completely paralyzed, Emma had become both his greatest joy and his deepest heartbreak. "Daddy, watch this," Emma called out from her wheelchair, her golden curls bouncing as she spun the wheels with practiced ease. At 8 years old, she navigated St. Mary's Medical Center like she owned the place, which, in many ways, she did. Every nurse, every doctor, every staff member knew Emma Thompson, the surgeon's bright-eyed daughter who spent most afternoons in the children's wing while her father worked his demanding schedule. Michael watched from the nurse's station, his heart swelling with pride and aching with guilt. He'd consulted every specialist, reviewed every case study, explored every experimental treatment. Nothing. The best medical minds in the country had told him the same thing. Emma would never walk. "She's something special, that little one," came a soft voice beside him. Maria Santos, the evening janitor, stood quietly mopping the floors. Her son, Lucas, a shy 7-year-old with striking blonde hair that seemed almost out of place with his Hispanic heritage, sat on a nearby bench reading a worn picture book. Michael nodded, managing a tired smile. "She is. I just wish." He trailed off, the familiar weight of helplessness settling on his shoulders. Maria paused her cleaning, studying him with knowing eyes. "Sometimes the answers we seek aren't found in the places we're looking, Doctor." Before Michael could ask what she meant, Lucas suddenly looked up from his book, his bright blue eyes fixed intently on Emma. The boy stood slowly, almost dreamlike, and walked toward her wheelchair. "Hi," Lucas said quietly, his small hand reaching out to touch Emma's leg. "Does it hurt?" Emma shook her head, smiling. "I can't feel anything down there. The doctors say the messages from my brain can't reach my legs." Lucas nodded seriously, his hand still resting gently on her knee. "Maybe they're just taking the wrong path," he whispered. And then something impossible happened. Emma's left foot twitched. Both children stared down in stunned silence. Emma's eyes went wide, her breath catching. "Did you see that? Daddy, did you see that?" Michael rushed over, his medical training warring with the impossibility of what he'd witnessed. Emma's foot had definitely moved. Just a small twitch, but movement nonetheless. Movement that hadn't existed for 8 years. "I felt something," Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Daddy, I actually felt something." As Michael knelt beside his daughter's wheelchair, checking her reflexes with trembling hands, he caught sight of Maria in his peripheral vision. The janitor stood frozen, her face pale as death, staring at her son with what looked like pure terror. What was Maria Santos so afraid of? And why did Lucas seem completely unsurprised by what had just happened? Dr. Michael Thompson hadn't slept in 36 hours. Every medical journal, every neurological study, every case report about spontaneous recovery sat scattered across his office desk like pieces of an impossible puzzle. Empty coffee cups formed a small graveyard beside his computer, testament to his desperate search for answers that didn't seem to exist in any textbook. Emma's foot had moved 3 more times since yesterday, each twitch documented, measured, analyzed with the precision of a man whose world suddenly made no sense. The movements were small but deliberate, not the random muscle spasms that sometimes plagued paralyzed patients, but purposeful flexions that responded to Emma's conscious commands. The nerve pathways show absolutely no change, Dr. Patricia Hayes, the hospital's lead neurologist, said flatly as she reviewed Emma's latest MRI results. Her voice carried the weight of 20 years treating spinal injuries, 20 years of delivering hard truths to desperate families. The damage is identical to her previous scans. Whatever happened yesterday was likely a muscle spasm. False hope is cruel, Michael. But Michael had seen his daughter's face when that first movement occurred. The pure joy, the tears of possibility streaming down her cheeks as she whispered, "I felt it, Daddy. I really felt it." That wasn't the reaction of a child experiencing a meaningless spasm. Patricia. She felt sensation. Real sensation. Temperature, pressure, touch. Things that haven't existed for her since birth, Michael insisted, pulling up the detailed notes he'd been keeping. Look at these response tests. Yesterday she couldn't feel anything below her waist. Today she correctly identified hot and cold stimuli on both feet. Dr. Hayes adjusted her glasses, studying the data with clinical detachment, coincidence, psychological response. The mind is powerful, Michael. Sometimes it creates sensations that aren't really there. There are documented explanations for everything you're showing me. Where's Lucas today? Emma interrupted from her wheelchair, rolling into the office with the determination that reminded Michael so much of himself. Her golden curls bounced with each push of the wheels, and her blue eyes sparkled with an excitement Michael hadn't seen in years. "I want to see Lucas again. Maybe he can help me move my whole foot this time." "Doctor." Hayes's eyebrows raised in confusion. "Lucas?" "The janitor's son," Michael explained, watching his colleague's expression shift to that barely concealed judgment he'd encountered before when discussing unconventional treatments. Sympathy mixed with professional skepticism, the look that said, "Desperate father grasping at straws." "Michael," Patricia said gently, "I understand your hope, but attributing your daughter's progress to a 7-year-old boy isn't helping anyone. We need to focus on realistic treatment options." Meanwhile, 3 floors down in the hospital's basement level, Maria Santos scrubbed the same spot on the linoleum for the 15th time, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold the mop. Her mind kept replaying yesterday's impossible scene, her son's small hand on Emma's leg, the look of serene concentration on his face, the way he'd seemed to know exactly what to do. Lucas sat nearby in his usual spot, unusually quiet for a chatty 7-year-old, drawing pictures with worn crayons on the back of discarded patient forms. His artwork showed stick figures holding hands, their bodies surrounded by swirls of golden light that seemed to flow from one person to another. "Mijo, we need to talk," Maria whispered in Spanish, kneeling beside her son. Her voice trembled with barely contained panic. "Yesterday, with the doctor's little girl, what exactly did you do?" Lucas looked up with those impossibly blue eyes, eyes that reminded Maria too much of her own grandmother, eyes that seemed to hold knowledge far beyond his years. "I just touched her, Mama, like Abuela Elena taught you when you were little." Maria's blood turned to ice water in her veins. She'd never told Lucas about her grandmother's teachings, never mentioned the old woman's claims about healing hands, about the family gift that supposedly skipped generations. She'd buried those memories when she left Colombia 15 years ago, determined to live a normal American life, free from the supernatural whispers of her childhood. "Lucas, you can't do that anymore. Promise me you won't touch sick people like that again." "But Mama," Lucas said with the simple logic of childhood, "Emma was so sad before. Her legs didn't work and it made her cry. Now she's happy and she can feel things. Isn't that good? Promise me." Maria's voice cracked with desperation, drawing curious looks from passing staff members. Lucas nodded slowly, but his small fingers continued drawing healing hands in crayon, as if guided by instincts he couldn't quite understand or control. That night, Maria sat in her small apartment staring at the faded photograph she'd hidden in a shoebox for 15 years. buried beneath winter clothes and forgotten memories. Her grandmother Eleanor stood in their Colombian village square, hands pressed against a young boy's chest, surrounded by a crowd of believers and skeptics. That same boy had walked for the first time that day after 3 years of paralysis from polio. "Abuela," Maria whispered to the photograph, her voice breaking in the empty room. "What did you pass down to him? What did you put in his blood?" She remembered Elena's warnings as clearly as if they'd been spoken yesterday. "The gift comes with a price, mija. Every healing takes something from the healer. The stronger the cure, the higher the cost. Promise me you'll never teach this to your children. Let the gift die with me." But somehow, impossibly, Lucas knew anyway. He'd been born with knowledge that should have died with Elena. The next morning at St. Mary's Medical Center, Emma waited eagerly in the physical therapy room, her wheelchair positioned near the parallel bars she'd never been able to use. Her legs had shown 3 more episodes of movement overnight, each stronger and more controlled than the last. The nursing staff whispered about miracles in the hallways, while the doctors maintained their professional skepticism behind closed doors. "I moved my ankle 5 times this morning," Emma announced proudly to anyone who would listen. "Real movements, not just twitches, and I could feel the blanket on my toes when I woke up." Physical therapist Janet Morrison documented everything with careful notes, torn between professional training and growing amazement. "The muscle tone is definitely improving," she told Michael during his morning visit. "I've never seen anything like this in a case with this level of spinal damage." Lucas appeared in the doorway with his mother, who looked like she hadn't slept in days. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her usually neat uniform was wrinkled and coffee-stained. "Emma!" Lucas ran toward her with the enthusiasm of childhood friendship, ignoring Maria's sharp intake of breath and desperate grab for his arm. "Lucas, I felt my toes this morning, both feet." Emma's excitement was infectious, drawing a crowd of nurses, orderlies, and even some visiting doctors who'd heard about the mysterious recovery. "That's wonderful," Lucas said simply, reaching for her hands with the natural compassion that made him special. The moment their skin touched, Emma gasped audibly. "I can feel warmth, like sunshine going all the way down my legs, reaching places that have been dark for so long." Dr. Michael appeared in the doorway, having been summoned by the commotion. He watched in fascination tinged with growing alarm as his daughter's legs began showing subtle but definite muscle contractions, voluntary movements that shouldn't exist according to every diagnosis she'd ever received. "How is this possible?" he asked no one in particular, his medical training warring with the evidence before his eyes. Maria stepped forward, her voice barely audible above the excited chatter of the crowd. "Dr. Thompson, could we speak privately, please?" As they walked toward his office, neither adult noticed Lucas swaying slightly on his feet, or the way he pressed his small hand against his chest where his heart raced with an unnatural rhythm. The price Elena had warned about was already being paid, 1 heartbeat at a time. Dr. Michael Thompson had built his entire reputation on facts, evidence, and the scientific method. He'd published papers in prestigious journals, lectured at medical conferences, and never once deviated from evidence-based medicine. But watching his daughter's impossible recovery was forcing him into uncharted territory, where medical training met unexplainable mystery. "I want to run comprehensive tests on the boy," he told Dr. Hayes during their morning rounds, his voice carrying the determination that had made him one of the hospital's youngest department heads. "Complete blood work, neurological assessment, cardiac monitoring, everything we have." Dr. Hayes stopped walking, her expression shifting from professional interest to genuine concern. "Michael, you're chasing ghosts. The child is 7 years old and perfectly healthy. What exactly are you hoping to find? Evidence, explanation, something that makes sense of what I'm witnessing." Michael pulled up Emma's charts on his tablet. "Look at these progression notes. 3 days ago, complete paralysis below the waist. Today, voluntary muscle control and restored sensation in both legs. This doesn't happen, Patricia. Not ever. Recovery from spinal injuries can be unpredictable. Not this unpredictable. Not this complete. Not this fast. Michael's voice rose with frustration, and every significant improvement coincides with her contact with Lucas Santos. Doctor, Hayes sighed deeply, the sound of a veteran physician who'd seen too many desperate families grasp at impossible explanations. Even if that were true, which it medically cannot be, what are you suggesting? That a janitor's son has healing powers? We're doctors, Michael, not faith healers or mystics. Oh, but Michael couldn't shake what he'd witnessed with his own eyes. Emma's progress defied every textbook, every case study, every principle of neurology he'd ever learned. In 3 days, she'd regained partial sensation in both legs, could flex her ankles voluntarily, and even showed early signs of thigh muscle activation. He found Maria during her lunch break, sitting alone in the hospital chapel, a small, quiet room that most staff members forgot existed. Afternoon sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the simple wooden pews. Mrs. Santos, I need your permission to examine Lucas. Nothing invasive or harmful, just routine medical tests to understand what's happening. Maria's hands trembled as they clutched a worn rosary. Doctor, please understand. My son is just a normal boy. He goes to school, plays with toys, watches cartoons. He's not. Whatever you think he is. Your son appears to be helping my daughter in ways I can't explain medically. As a physician and as a father, I need to understand how this is possible. And if you can't explain it scientifically, will you try to stop it? Will you separate them? The question hung between them like a challenge, forcing Michael to confront possibilities he hadn't fully considered. Understanding might indeed mean ending Emma's recovery if the mechanism was deemed too dangerous or unpredictable. I just want to help them both, he said finally, the honesty in his voice evident even to himself. Maria studied his face carefully, seeing genuine concern rather than exploitation or medical curiosity. After a long moment, she spoke quietly. There are things about healing that your medical books don't teach, Doctor. My grandmother knew this truth. But knowledge like hers, it comes with consequences that you might not be prepared for. What kind of consequences? Before Maria could answer, a code blue alarm echoed through the hospital corridors, followed by the terrifying sound of a child's voice screaming in pain. Both adults rushed toward the sound, their hearts pounding with sudden dread. They found Lucas collapsed in the children's wing, unconscious and burning with fever, his small body convulsing slightly. Emma sat in her wheelchair beside him, tears streaming down her face as she reached helplessly toward her fallen friend. He was helping me practice moving my legs, she sobbed. We were alone, and I asked him to touch my knees like yesterday. Then he just fell down and started shaking. Michael knelt beside the unconscious boy, his medical training taking over as he checked pulse, breathing and responsiveness. Lucas's heartbeat was weak and irregular, like his small body was fighting an invisible battle that was slowly draining his life force. Get him to pediatric ICU now, Michael ordered, lifting Lucas in his arms and feeling how frighteningly light the 7-year-old had become. Lucas lay unconscious in the pediatric ICU for 18 agonizing hours, connected to monitors that beeped ominously in the sterile room. His vital signs fluctuated wildly, fever spiking to dangerous 104-degree levels before dropping to near hypothermic temperatures that sent alarm bells ringing. His heart rate alternated between racing at 150 beats per minute and barely detectable bradycardia that terrified the nursing staff. Maria never left his bedside, holding his small hand while whispering prayers in Spanish and English. Ancient words her grandmother had taught her, mixed with desperate pleas to any god who might be listening. Michael found himself checking on the boy every hour, unable to focus on his other patients or responsibilities. "The blood work is completely normal," Dr. Hayes reported, her voice puzzled and concerned. "Brain scans show no trauma, no infection, no tumors, no explanation for the neurological symptoms. His white cell count is perfect, no signs of illness or disease. But Emma's progress has stopped completely," Michael observed, the correlation impossible to ignore. Since Lucas fell unconscious, his daughter showed no further improvement. Her newly regained sensations remained stable but didn't advance. The connection seemed undeniable now, though it challenged everything Michael believed about medicine. When Lucas finally opened his eyes, pale blue and unfocused, his first whispered word was, "Emma." "I'm here, mijo," Maria said, squeezing his hand and trying to hide her tears. "You're safe now, Mama's here." "Is Emma okay? Did I help her enough?" His voice was weak, but filled with genuine concern for his friend rather than his own condition. Michael stepped forward, his doctor instincts warring with growing paternal protectiveness toward this extraordinary child. "Lucas, can you tell me what happens when you touch Emma? What do you feel inside your body?" "Uda," the boy looked at his mother with questioning eyes, seeking permission to speak truths that sounded impossible. Maria nodded reluctantly, knowing the time for secrets had passed. "It's like her hurt comes into me, and my good feelings go into her," Lucas explained with the simple wisdom that children use to describe complex realities adults struggle to understand. "The broken parts of her legs talk to the strong parts of my legs, and we trade places for a little while." Michael felt his scientific worldview shifting like tectonic plates. "Does it hurt when this happens?" "At first, it feels warm and nice, like when Mama hugs me. But then it gets heavy, like I'm carrying something too big for me. And afterward, I feel very tired." "Abuela Elena was my grandmother," Maria explained to Michael, her voice thick with emotion. "She died when Lucas was 3 years old. He shouldn't remember her teachings, but somehow—" She gestured helplessly at her son, struggling with the impossibility of inherited memory. "She visits me sometimes in dreams," Lucas added matter-of-factly, as if conversations with deceased great-grandmothers were perfectly normal. "She says I'm like her, but I have to be stronger because the hurt in this world is bigger than it used to be. She teaches me how to find the broken places and fix them." Michael felt everything he'd learned in medical school, everything he believed about healing and human anatomy, being challenged by a 7-year-old boy, speaking with the calm certainty of experience. "Lucas, when you help Emma, it makes you sick?" "A little bit, but she was so sad before, and her daddy was sad too. Now she smiles and can feel her feet. That's worth being tired." The simple truth of it hit Michael like a physical blow to his chest. This child was literally sacrificing his health to heal his daughter, and he did it willingly out of pure compassion and love. "We need to stop this," Michael said suddenly, the words torn from his throat. "I can't let you hurt yourself for Emma. No father should ask that of another child." "But doctor," Lucas said quietly, his voice carrying wisdom beyond his years, "Emma's not all better yet. She still can't walk, and I promised I'd help her." But at 2 a.m., with the hospital settled into its quiet nighttime rhythm, Maria finally broke her 15-year silence about her grandmother's legacy. Sitting in Michael's office, surrounded by medical texts and diplomas that suddenly seemed inadequate, she told him everything she'd tried to forget. Elena Vasquez was known throughout our village and 3 neighboring towns as La Sanadora, the healer. People came from hundreds of miles away, bringing their sick children, their dying parents, their broken bodies and shattered hopes. And she helped them all, every single person who came to her door. Michael leaned forward, his medical training warring with growing fascination. How exactly did she do it? The same way Lucas helps Emma. She absorbed their pain, their sickness, their broken bones and dying organs. She took it all into herself through touch, through intention, through a kind of love that cost everything. Maria's voice broke as she remembered her grandmother's final years, and it killed her. Eventually, the gift demands payment, doctor. Every healing shortens the healer's life. Elena died at 43, but she saved hundreds of people before the price became too high to pay. She looked 70 when she died, aged by all the suffering she'd taken into her own body. Michael stared at the photograph Maria had brought. A young woman in traditional Colombian dress who looked remarkably like Lucas, with the same piercing blue eyes, the same gentle smile, the same aura of quiet strength. She made me promise never to teach this to my children. She said the gift was too dangerous, too costly, but Lucas was born knowing these things. The gift skipped my generation entirely and went straight to him, stronger than it had ever been before. How much time does he have if he continues helping Emma? Maria's voice cracked with the weight of impossible knowledge. I don't know exactly. Elena said it depends on how much healing the person does and how serious the conditions they cure. Small things like cuts and bruises barely affect the healer, but something like Emma's complete paralysis could kill him or age him rapidly. Elena went from looking 25 to 70 in just 10 years of heavy healing. Her hair turned white. Her skin became like paper, her bones grew brittle. She gave her life force to save others. They sat in silence, the weight of impossible choices pressing down on them like a physical presence. In the next room, Emma slept peacefully for the first time in weeks, her legs showing their first signs of muscle tone in 8 years. Down the hall, Lucas dreamed of walking hand in hand with his great-grandmother through golden fields that existed nowhere on earth. "There's something else you need to know," Maria whispered, her voice barely audible. "Elena told me that the gift grows stronger with each generation. Lucas might be able to heal things that even she couldn't touch, but the price will be proportionally higher." "Dr. Thompson," Maria looked directly into his eyes, "what would you do? If you were me, would you let your child sacrifice himself to heal another child, even if that child belonged to someone you respected?" Michael looked toward Emma's room, where his daughter slept with hope in her heart for the first time in her life. Then he looked back at Maria's tear-stained face, seeing a mother's love warring with a mother's terror. "I don't know," he admitted with brutal honesty. "But we need to find out exactly what we're dealing with. There has to be a way to protect Lucas while helping Emma. There has to be another path." "Elena used to say that love always finds a way," Maria said softly, "but sometimes the way love finds costs everything we have to give." Outside, thunder rolled across the city like a cosmic warning, as if the universe itself was preparing for the difficult choices that lay ahead. "Doctor." Michael Thompson had never believed in miracles, but he'd also never been desperate enough to research them. His office now resembled a war room, with medical journals scattered alongside printouts about faith healing, energy work, and documented cases of unexplained recoveries. He'd contacted colleagues in Colombia, anthropologists who studied indigenous healing practices, even a few physicians who'd quietly witnessed similar phenomena. "You're losing your objectivity," Dr. Hayes warned during their weekly department meeting. "The hospital board is asking questions about your recent research requests. Funding applications for studies on supernatural healing aren't going to advance your career." Michael barely heard her concerns. Emma had been walking, actually walking, for short distances with the help of parallel bars. 2 weeks ago, such progress would have been impossible. But each session with Lucas left the boy weaker, and yesterday he'd fainted twice during school. "I found something," Michael announced to Maria during one of their increasingly frequent conversations. He'd taken to meeting her in the chapel, the only place that felt appropriate for discussions that challenged everything he'd been trained to believe. Maria looked up from her prayers, hope and fear warring in her dark eyes. About the healing? About your grandmother. I contacted a colleague at Universidad Nacional in Bogotá. Elena Vasquez is mentioned in several anthropological studies from the 1980s. She wasn't just a local healer, Maria. She was part of a lineage, a family line that goes back generations. Michael pulled out photocopied pages from academic journals, dense text in Spanish and English describing hereditary healing abilities in isolated Colombian communities. According to these studies, families like yours appear every few generations throughout South America. The gift manifests differently in each person, but the core ability remains the same. What else do they say? Maria's voice was barely above a whisper. That the healers rarely live past 50, and that their children often die young from mysterious illnesses that sound remarkably similar to what's happening to Lucas. And the weight of this revelation settled between them like a stone. Lucas wasn't just risking his health, he was following a pattern that had killed others like him for generations. But there's something else, Michael continued, his voice gaining strength. One study mentions a healer named Carlos Mendez, who learned to share the burden, to distribute the cost of healing among willing family members. He lived to be 67. Maria's eyes widened. Share the burden? How? The research is incomplete, but it suggests that if multiple family members with even dormant healing abilities work together, they can divide the physical cost among themselves. Instead of one person bearing all the damage, several people take smaller portions. Do you think I might have some of Elena's gift? There's only one way to find out, and Maria. Michael hesitated, knowing what he was about to suggest would sound insane to anyone listening. I want to be tested too. If Lucas can somehow teach others to help carry this load, I want to learn. Doctor, you don't understand what you're asking. This isn't something you can learn in medical school. Then teach me the way Elena taught her family. Emma is my daughter, and Lucas is risking his life for her. The least I can do is try to help share that risk. That evening, as Lucas lay exhausted in his mother's arms after another healing session with Emma, Maria made a decision that would change all their lives. Mijo, would you be willing to teach Dr. Thompson and me how to help you, the way Abuela Elena used to teach her family? Lucas looked up with those ancient blue eyes and smiled weakly. Abuela Elena has been waiting for you to ask, Mama. She says it's time for all of us to work together. The basement storage room at St. Mary's Medical Center had been unused for months, filled with outdated equipment and forgotten supplies. At midnight, it became a classroom for lessons that couldn't be found in any medical textbook. Lucas sat on a makeshift cushion made from old linens, his small hands resting palm up on his knees in a pose that seemed far too mature for his 7 years. Maria and Michael sat across from him, both adults fighting their own skepticism about what they were attempting. Abuela Elena says healing starts with feeling, Lucas explained in his quiet, serious voice. You have to feel where the hurt lives in the sick person. Then you have to be willing to invite that hurt into your own body. Michael struggled with the concept, but medically that's impossible. Pain and injury aren't transferable substances. Doctor, Maria said gently, maybe tonight we set aside what's medically possible and focus on what might be necessary. Lucas reached for both their hands, his small fingers surprisingly warm. Close your eyes. Think about Emma. Picture her legs, but don't see the broken parts. See the parts that want to work. The moment Lucas's skin touched theirs, both adults gasped. A warmth unlike anything either had experienced flowed up their arms. Not the heat of fever or friction, but something that seemed to originate from a source deeper than blood or bone. Now feel where her legs hurt, Lucas whispered. Not the pain she feels, but the sadness her legs carry from being broken for so long. Michael felt ridiculous, sitting in a storage room at midnight trying to psychically connect with his daughter's paralyzed limbs. But as Lucas's grip tightened, something shifted. A strange heaviness settled in Michael's own legs, a sensation like invisible weights pressing down on his thighs and calves. "I feel it," Maria breathed, her voice filled with wonder and fear. "It's like her legs are crying." "That's the hurt," Lucas confirmed. "Now here's the hard part. You have to be willing to take some of that crying into your own legs, but just a little bit. We're sharing it 3 ways now." For the next hour, Lucas guided them through exercises that had no name in medical terminology. They practiced sensing injury, identifying the emotional and physical components of trauma, and most importantly, learning to accept small portions of suffering into their own bodies. By the end of the lesson, all 3 were exhausted. Michael's legs ached with phantom pains he couldn't explain, and Maria found herself limping slightly as they prepared to leave. "Did it work?" Michael asked. "We'll find out tomorrow," Lucas said simply. "But I feel lighter already, like I'm not carrying Emma's hurt all by myself anymore." The next morning, Emma's progress was remarkable. She took 12 steps with minimal support, her longest walk since her paralysis began. But more importantly, Lucas remained alert and energetic throughout the day, the first time in weeks he hadn't collapsed after a healing session. "It's working," Michael told Maria during lunch break. "Somehow, impossibly, it's actually working." But their relief was premature. That evening, Maria received a call that chilled her blood. "Mrs. Santos, this is Principal Martinez from Lucas's school. We need you to come immediately. Lucas collapsed during recess and he's saying things that are concerning." Real. When Maria and Michael arrived at the elementary school, they found Lucas sitting in the nurse's office, his eyes unfocused and distant. "Abuela Elena says there are others coming," he whispered when he saw them. "Other healers who want to help. But some of them are angry that we're sharing the gift with people who weren't born to it." "Bah, what others?" Maria asked, her voice tight with new fear. "I don't know their names, but they're coming to the hospital tonight. They want to test us." At 3 a.m., St. Mary's Medical Center felt different. The usual nighttime calm was disturbed by an energy that made the fluorescent lights flicker and set the hospital's sensitive equipment on edge. Maria had stayed overnight, sleeping in a chair beside Lucas's hospital bed after his collapse at school. She woke to find her son standing at the window, staring out at the parking lot with an intensity that frightened her. "They're here," Lucas said without turning around. "Who's here, mijo?" "The other healers. Abuela Elena brought them." Maria joined him at the window and saw them immediately, 5 figures standing in the parking lot, illuminated by the security lights. They ranged in age from a teenager to an elderly man, but all shared the same unmistakable presence that Lucas carried, the same otherworldly stillness. "Lucas, what do they want?" "To see if we're doing the right thing. Some of them think Dr. Thompson shouldn't be learning our family's gift. They think it's dangerous to teach outsiders." Dr. Michael arrived at the hospital early, as had become his habit since Lucas's training began. He found Maria and Lucas in the pediatric ward, both staring out the window at the group in the parking lot. "Who are they?" Michael asked, though something deep in his chest already knew the answer. "Family," Lucas said simply. "Great cousins mostly, and one uncle who died before I was born, but still watches over our family line." Michael felt his rational mind struggling to process this information. "Lucas, you're saying there are dead people in our parking lot?" "Only Uncle Carlos. The others are alive, but they live far away. Abuela Elena called them to come test us." As if summoned by their conversation, the group began moving toward the hospital entrance. Maria grabbed Lucas's hand instinctively. "What kind of test?" "They want to see if sharing the gift has made it stronger or weaker, and they want to know if Dr. Thompson can really handle the burden without it killing him." The elevator chimed softly, and moments later the group appeared in the hallway. Up close, Michael could see that each person carried the same genetic markers as Lucas: the piercing blue eyes, the blonde hair that seemed unusual in their Hispanic features, the air of quiet authority. The eldest, a woman who appeared to be in her 70s, stepped forward and spoke in accented English. "I am Esperanza Vasquez, Elena's sister. I have come from Mexico to see the child who carries our grandmother's strongest gift." Her gaze fixed on Lucas with an intensity that made Michael step protectively closer to the boy. "And I am here to determine if this doctor," she looked at Michael with obvious skepticism, "is worthy of learning our family's sacred knowledge." "With respect," Michael said, finding his voice, "I'm not trying to steal anything. I'm just trying to help my daughter and protect your great-nephew." "Protection?" Esperanza's laugh was sharp. "You understand nothing about protection. The gift has been in our bloodline for 12 generations. It has rules, costs, and consequences that outsiders cannot comprehend." She turned to Lucas, her expression softening slightly. "Show me what you have learned about sharing, Nieto." Lucas nodded and reached for his mother's hand, then Michael's. The moment the three were connected, the hospital room filled with the same golden warmth they'd experienced during their midnight lessons. But this time, the warmth was met by a crackling energy from Esperanza and the other healers. The air itself seemed to vibrate with competing forces: Lucas's gentle, shared healing and a more ancient, demanding power from his relatives. "Interesting," Esperanza murmured. "The gift grows stronger when shared, but also wilder, more difficult to control." She stepped back, her expression grave. "There will be a formal test tomorrow night. If the doctor fails, he must promise never to attempt healing again. If he succeeds—" She paused, studying Michael intently. "If he succeeds, he will be bound to this family and its responsibilities for the rest of his life." "What does the test involve?" Michael asked. "You will attempt to heal someone whose condition is beyond current medical treatment. If you can succeed without dying or going insane from the transferred trauma, you will be accepted. If you fail—" "I won't fail," Michael said, with more confidence than he felt. Esperanza smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "We shall see, Doctor. We shall see." The abandoned wing of St. Mary's Medical Center hadn't been used since the hospital's expansion 5 years ago. The halls were dark, the rooms empty, but tonight they hummed with an energy that made the very walls seem alive. Esperanza Vasquez had transformed the largest room into something between a medical facility and an ancient ritual space. Candles provided the only light, their flames casting dancing shadows on equipment that Michael recognized but had never seen used in this context. "The test is simple in concept, complex in execution," Esperanza explained as the gathered healers formed a circle around a hospital bed. "You will attempt to heal a condition that your modern medicine has declared incurable. If you can succeed while sharing the burden with Lucas and Maria, you pass. If you fail, what happens if I fail? The transferred trauma could kill you or drive you mad. The mind was not meant to experience certain kinds of suffering directly." On the bed lay a young woman Michael had never seen before, unconscious and connected to portable monitors. Her chart, handwritten in Spanish and English, revealed a devastating diagnosis: terminal brain cancer, multiple tumors, weeks to live. "This is my granddaughter Isabella," said one of the visiting healers, a middle-aged man with tears in his eyes. "She is 22 years old. The doctors in Arizona have sent her home to die." Michael felt the weight of impossibility settling on his shoulders. As a neurosurgeon, he knew exactly how devastating Isabella's condition was. He'd seen dozens of similar cases, and modern medicine offered no hope. "I can't cure brain cancer," he said honestly. Even with whatever gifts I might be developing, this is beyond. Nothing is beyond the gift when properly applied, Esperanza interrupted. Elena once cured cancer that had spread throughout a man's entire body. But the cost. She gestured to Lucas. The boy will age years in a single night if this healing succeeds. Are you prepared for that responsibility? Michael looked at Lucas, who nodded solemnly, despite being only 7 years old. Dr. Thompson, Lucas said quietly, Isabella has 2 little girls at home. Twins. They're 4 years old, and they keep asking when Mama is coming home. The decision crystallized in Michael's mind. This wasn't just about proving himself to a family of healers. This was about a mother returning to her children. What do I need to do? The ritual that followed challenged everything Michael thought he knew about medicine, consciousness, and the nature of healing itself. With Lucas and Maria on either side of him, their hands creating a connection that seemed to bypass normal neurological pathways, Michael placed his palms on Isabella's skull. The moment contact was made, Michael's world exploded into agony, unlike anything he'd ever experienced. The cancer wasn't just a collection of abnormal cells. It was a living darkness that seemed to feed on hope and joy. As he drew it into himself, following Lucas's whispered instructions, Michael felt the malignant growth spreading through his own brain tissue. His vision blurred, his thoughts scattered, and for terrifying moments he couldn't remember his own name. But through it all, he felt Lucas and Maria sharing the burden, taking portions of the darkness into themselves, their love for each other, and for Isabella creating a network of shared suffering. Focus on her daughters, Lucas gasped, his young face pale with strain. Picture them hugging their mama. Hold that image in your mind while the cancer tries to make you forget everything good. For what felt like hours, but was probably minutes, the 3 of them battled Isabella's cancer on a level that had nothing to do with medical training and everything to do with willpower and love. Michael felt years of his life being burned away like fuel in a fire, but he also felt the tumors in Isabella's brain shrinking, dissolving, being absorbed into the shared network of healers. When it was over, all 3 collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Michael woke 12 hours later to find Isabella sitting up in bed, alert and speaking clearly to her crying family members. Her latest brain scan, taken by a baffled radiology team, showed no trace of cancer, but the cost was evident. Lucas looked noticeably older, his face carrying lines of premature maturity. Maria's hair had streaks of grey that hadn't been there before, and Michael himself felt hollow, as if something essential had been permanently drained from his core. You have passed the test, Esperanza said solemnly. You are now bound to our family and its sacred responsibility. But more importantly, her stern expression softened, you have given a mother back to her children. As Isabella hugged her twins in the hospital room, Michael realized that some prices were worth paying no matter how high. 3 weeks after the test, the consequences of Michael's acceptance into the healer family became clear. Lucas had grown taller overnight, his face losing its childish roundness and gaining the angular features of a boy several years older. Maria looked exhausted despite sleeping 10 hours a night, and Michael found himself needing reading glasses for the first time in his life. But their sacrifice had created something unprecedented, a healing network that could tackle conditions no single healer could survive alone. Word spread quietly through certain communities. Desperate families began arriving at St. Mary's Medical Center, not for traditional medical treatment, but seeking the miracle doctor who worked with the Santos family. Michael found himself treating conditions he'd never imagined. Children born without immune systems, elderly patients with aggressive dementia, accident victims with injuries that should have been fatal. Each healing took its toll, but shared among 3 people, the cost was manageable, barely. "We can't keep this pace," Maria warned during one of their midnight meetings in the abandoned wing. "Lucas is showing signs of premature aging, and you look like you've lost 10 years of your life." Michael studied his reflection in the dark window. His hair was graying at the temples, and lines had appeared around his eyes that hadn't been there a month ago. But Emma was not only walking, but running, dancing, living the normal life of an 8-year-old girl. "How many more?" he asked. "How many people are coming?" "Esperanza says there are at least 50 families who've heard about us. Children with conditions that modern medicine can't touch. Adults who've been given death sentences by their doctors. And if we stop, then they die," Lucas said simply, appearing in the doorway despite supposedly being asleep in the family quarters Michael had arranged for them at the hospital. "But if we continue at this rate, we die instead." The impossible mathematics of their situation hung in the air like smoke. To save others, they were consuming their own life force at an unsustainable rate. "There has to be another way," Michael said. "Some method of healing that doesn't require such sacrifice." "There is," said a new voice from the shadows. Dr. Patricia Hayes stepped into the light, her expression unreadable. "I've been watching what you're doing, Michael, monitoring the patients, reviewing the cases. What you've accomplished is medically impossible, but it's also undeniably real." Michael tensed, prepared for accusations of fraud or demands for explanations he couldn't provide. "I want to help," Patricia continued. "I don't understand how your healing works, but I've seen the results. Children who should have died are going home healthy. If there's a way to share this burden further, to create a larger network—" "You're talking about expanding the healing circle," Maria said slowly. "I'm talking about combining the best of modern medicine with whatever gift your family possesses. Imagine if we could identify the most hopeless cases and focus our efforts there while using traditional medicine for everything else." Lucas studied Dr. Hayes with those ancient blue eyes. "She has the potential," he said finally. "I can see the healing light in her, but it's sleeping. We could wake it up." "Is it safe?" Michael asked. "Teaching more people?" "Safer than burning ourselves out trying to save everyone alone," Maria replied. "But it means bringing more people into our family. Once they're connected to the healing network, they're bound to it for life." Dr. Hayes nodded seriously. "I understand the commitment. The question is, how many healers do we need to make this sustainable?" "Abuela Elena says at least 7, Lucas answered, his voice carrying the weight of ancestral knowledge. 7 healers can share the burden of almost any healing without losing years of their lives. "Then we find 4 more, Michael decided, but we choose carefully. This isn't just about medical knowledge. It's about people willing to sacrifice part of themselves for strangers." As they planned their expansion, none of them noticed the figure watching from the parking lot below. Esperanza Vasquez stood in the shadows, her expression troubled. The gift was growing beyond what any of them had anticipated, and with growth came dangers that even her ancient knowledge couldn't predict. Tomorrow, she would have to make a choice that could either save their healing network or destroy it entirely. 6 months after Isabella's miraculous recovery, St. Mary's Medical Center had quietly become something unprecedented, a hospital where medicine and miracle coexisted. The official records showed only remarkable recovery rates in the pediatric wing, but those who worked there whispered about the Santos family and their mysterious gift. Dr. Michael Thompson stood at his office window, watching Emma play in the hospital garden below. At 8 years old, she ran and jumped with the boundless energy of any healthy child, her blonde curls catching the morning sunlight. But there was something different about her now, something that made Michael both proud and concerned. "She's been asking questions," Maria said, entering the office with 2 cups of coffee, a ritual that had developed between them over the months of shared healing. Yesterday she wanted to know why Lucas looks older now and why your hair has grey streaks. What did you tell her? The truth. That sometimes helping others costs something, but love makes the cost worth paying. Michael accepted the coffee gratefully. His hands showed the tremor that had developed after particularly difficult healings, and some mornings he felt decades older than his 33 years. But the children they'd saved made every sacrifice meaningful. The review board meets today, Michael said. They want answers about our success rates. How do we explain what we can't document? Before Maria could answer, Lucas appeared in the doorway. The boy who had been 7 years old 6 months ago now looked like a mature 10-year-old, his face carrying wisdom that belonged to someone far older. The accelerated aging had stabilized, but the change was permanent. We might not have to explain anything, Lucas said quietly. Emma has something to show you. They found Emma in the garden, sitting beside Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who'd been admitted with end-stage arthritis in both hands. Emma held the woman's gnarled fingers gently, her eyes closed in concentration. "Emma, what are you doing?" Michael asked, though something deep in his chest already knew. "Helping Mrs. Patterson's hands feel better," Emma replied, without opening her eyes. "But not the way you and Lucas do it. I found a different way." As they watched, Mrs. Patterson's fingers began to straighten, the swollen joints reducing to normal size. But unlike their healing sessions, Emma showed no signs of strain or exhaustion. Instead, she seemed to glow with health and vitality. "How is this possible?" Maria whispered. "Because I already know what broken feels like," Emma explained, opening her eyes and smiling at Mrs. Patterson's amazed expression as she flexed her pain-free fingers. "When I help people, I don't take their hurt into me. Instead, I give them my memory of getting better. I share my healing instead of taking their sickness." Dr. Patricia Hayes, who had become the 4th member of their healing circle, emerged from the hospital carrying a tablet filled with test results. "Michael, you need to see this. Emma's neurological scans from this morning show activity patterns I've never encountered. Her brain is generating healing energy instead of absorbing trauma." Esperanza Vasquez appeared on the garden path, having arrived for her weekly monitoring of their expanding network. The elderly woman studied Emma with eyes that held 12 generations of healing wisdom. "The gift has evolved," she said with wonder in her voice. "Elena always said it would happen eventually, that one of our children would be born not just to heal, but to heal the healers themselves." "What does that mean?" Michael asked. "It means Emma can teach others to heal without sacrifice. She can show them how to give strength instead of taking pain." Esperanza knelt beside Emma, her stern expression softening to something approaching reverence. "Child, can you feel the healing light in other people? Can you help them find it?" Emma nodded seriously. "Lots of people have light inside them. They just don't know how to make it work, but I can show them." Over the next hour, they witnessed something that would change everything. Emma worked with 3 hospital volunteers, teaching them to access their own healing abilities without the devastating cost that Lucas's method required. By focusing on sharing health rather than absorbing sickness, these new healers could help patients improve without aging themselves or transferring trauma. "We can expand the network safely now," Dr. Hayes said, her voice filled with excitement. "If Emma can train healers who don't pay the physical price, we could help thousands of people." "But there's still a cost," Lucas reminded them, his young old face serious. "Not everyone is strong enough to give healing energy without getting tired, and some conditions are too big for this gentler method." "Then we use both approaches," Michael decided. "Emma's method for most cases, and our trauma-sharing technique only for the most desperate situations. We create a true medical miracle, healing that combines the best of science and spirit." 6 months later, the Thompson Santos Institute for Advanced Healing opened quietly in a renovated wing of St. Mary's Medical Center. Officially, it was a research facility studying innovative therapeutic techniques. Unofficially, it was a place where children learned to walk again, where terminal diagnoses became recovery stories, and where the impossible happened with quiet regularity. Emma, now 9 and thriving, had become the Institute's youngest teacher, showing medical professionals from around the world how to access healing abilities they never knew they possessed. Lucas, despite his premature aging, served as the bridge between traditional healing wisdom and modern applications. Maria coordinated the growing network of healers, while Michael provided the medical oversight that kept their work credible and sustainable. Dr. Hayes had taken over Michael's former position as department head, allowing him to focus entirely on developing their revolutionary healing protocols. The review board's questions had been answered not with explanations they couldn't understand, but with results they couldn't deny. "We're changing everything," Michael said one evening, as he watched Emma help a young cancer patient rediscover his own healing abilities. "Medicine will never be the same, ever." "Good," Maria replied, her hand resting on Lucas's shoulder as they observed their miraculous family. "The world needs more healers, not more sickness." As the sun set over the city, casting golden light through the Institute's windows, Emma looked up from her work with a smile that seemed to contain all the hope in the world. "Daddy," she said, "I can see the healing light in almost everyone now. It's not just our family, it's everybody. They just needed someone to show them how to find it." Ali, the gift that had begun with a desperate father's love for his paralyzed daughter, had evolved into something far greater, a new understanding of healing itself, where love and medicine worked together to create miracles that no one had to die for. And in the quiet moments between treatments, when the Institute settled into peaceful evening routines, those who listened carefully could sometimes hear the whispered gratitude of Elena Vasquez, finally at rest, knowing her family's gift had found its true purpose, not just to heal the sick, but to teach the world to heal itself. The circle was complete, but the healing had only just begun.